Hello, my name is Katie Henry. This is my presentation on the achievement gap and educational disparities in Minnesota. I chose this topic because education is something that is really important to me. I have two children in school in Minneapolis, and I come from a family of educators, and I've worked in schools for probably about 15 years and plan to continue working in schools once I get done with my own education. The Federal Reserve Bank of Minneapolis recently released a report highlighting the educational disparities and achievement gap in Minnesota. They found that Minnesota has one of the largest achievement gaps in the country, and that these gaps are found throughout the state in both public and charter schools, and these disparities are found across race and income levels. Here's some data that kind of illustrates the disparities that are seen in a few different categories, and you can see that it's not just across race but across income level as well. Free or reduced lunch is the last bar on each graph, and those disparities are equally as concerning as the disparities between race groups. A lot of studies have been done to kind of identify the causes of the achievement gap. No study has really been able to pinpoint one specific cause for educational disparities, and in my opinion, it really looks like it's an interaction between all these different things that are listed on here and how they can create barriers for kids in their school achievement. Some of the consequences of this achievement gap are listed here. Academic achievement is really related to life outcomes, employment prospects, and income potential, and which really affects the kind of life that people are able to live and the way they're able to support themselves and their family. Education Minnesota has a full-service community schools model that they believe will address some of these barriers to academic achievement and really close that achievement gap. And so that's what I'm proposing as the kind of solution to this issue in Minnesota. This model is built on these four pillars: integrated student supports, expanded and enriched learning opportunities, active family, student, and community engagement, and school leadership that's driven by continuous improvement. So all of the coalition goals really come from these four pillars and trying to bring those into Minnesota schools. These are the goals for the campaign. The first one is to increase engagement and build a coalition. That includes individuals, schools, community organizations, and advocacy groups. Here's three members of the coalition. The one that I really want to highlight is Rogue Citizen. They're a Minneapolis-based art collective that really supports and encourages and actively participates in social justice campaigns. My brother-in-law is a member of Rogue Citizen. His name is Sean Dulson. He's also an art teacher in school in Minneapolis. One thing that I want to highlight from Rogue Citizen is the People's Creative Toolkit. It's a free resource for activists and organizers and other artists, and it contains information about strategy and messaging, and they have YouTube videos that teach people how to make signs and banners for their own social justice campaigns. And Sean also did the artwork that you saw on the first slide. The Cultural Wellness Center and Parents in Community Action are two community organizations in Minneapolis and St. Paul. North Point Health and Wellness Center is another member of the coalition. They are a community health center in North Minneapolis, which is an area of Minneapolis that has a lot of these struggling schools. And thinking back to things that we've learned in class, they're an area that was redlined in Minneapolis. Minnesota legislatures are in here, specifically the two House and Senate members for St. Paul are members of the Education Policy Committee and highlight education and children's issues as one of their special interests. And Education Minnesota is an organization I mentioned earlier. They are the ones who are really pushing this full service community schools model. They're an 80,000 member union for school staff, so teachers, paraprofessionals, speech pathologists, nurses, anybody who works in the school. And they have a really active policy action center and advocacy group already that is doing a lot of advocacy and policy work for education, and is a big advocate for this full service community schools model. The second goal of the campaign is to increase awareness through a media campaign. So one part of that is a Facebook group that was created called Fill the Gap. This Facebook group has information about the issue of educational disparities in Minnesota, information about the coalition and their goals, and information about upcoming events like a march to the state capitol in St. Paul that is planned for November 15th, 2020, which sort of kicks off the National Education Week. And part of this march is a sign-making party hosted by Rogue Citizen, and really using that People's Creative Toolkit and building a community within the coalition and teaching people how to really advertise their message and make the biggest impact they can during this march. Yard signs are also available on the Facebook page. Yard signs have been used everywhere, I'm sure, but they are, I know, in Minnesota to help advertise for schools and show support and increase awareness. Whenever there's a school funding issue on the ballot, yard signs are always used to increase that information and let people know that the issue is going to be there and the schools need the funding. So here's an image of the yard sign that the coalition would use and offer for members of the community to put in their yards and show their support for this issue and increase awareness of it. So the slogan is Fill the Gap, and our goal is to end educational disparities in Minnesota and help all kids achieve. There's information about the March to the Capitol and information about the Facebook group and inviting people to join the coalition to fill the gap. This artwork was created by Sean Dulson. He's a member of Rogue Citizen. I put the website earlier under the information about them, and I would really encourage everybody to check it out. Their art is really great, and they're a really great social justice art collective. The third goal of the campaign would be to increase funding for those full-service community schools. In 2017, the Minnesota legislature passed a bill giving funding to 2 schools to be able to begin to implement this model of full-service community schools. So our goal would be to increase that funding and be able to bring that model to more schools. The Education Minnesota Policy Action Center is one place that's already doing this work, so the coalition, having them as a member of the coalition, would help to increase their ability to affect policy. Enlisting members of the coalition to write to their Minnesota legislatures and attend Minnesota Education Minnesota Days at the Capitol, and also encouraging people to donate to their local schools and other community organizations that support schools and are bringing resources and services to local schools. Here are the ways we're going to evaluate our progress and impact of our campaign. This is a logic model that demonstrates all of the inputs and outputs of our campaign and what our short, medium, and long-term goals are. Listed on the bottom are some assumptions that we're making about this campaign. The biggest one being that schools will want to move to a full service model and really have the structure to be able to implement it. Listed is also some external factors that may affect this campaign. The way we're going to measure our outcomes of this campaign are looking for a shift in social norms, really demonstrated by a shift away from No Child Left Behind policy and standardized testing, which has not been very effective in improving Minnesota schools, and moving towards a trauma-informed and full-service community schools model that addresses the barriers to school performance and attendance. We're going to be looking for improved policies, a strengthened base of support, strengthened alliances, and changes in impact. Where our goals are to increase graduation and college readiness rates and have more students performing at grade level, especially for those groups that have the lowest percentages on that kind of data slide that we saw earlier. Here are the ways that the coalition is going to sustain the change that it's begun. One of those ways is through the full service model itself and its pillar of leadership in schools that is driven by continuous change. Continuous change that assesses the model and ensures that all the resources in the school are ones that help break down those barriers to academic performance and school attendance. Continuing the media campaign and keeping the issue current and in the forefront of everyone's minds. continuing that advocacy and policy work to increase funding and implementation of this model, as well as continuing personal engagement with the coalition and its local schools, encouraging members of the coalition to volunteer in their local schools, to donate money and time, and to attend fundraisers, to vote when those school issues are on the ballot, and really make Minnesota's schools a place where all kids can achieve and have those really positive academic outcomes. So that's it. Here's the references that I used, and thank you for listening.